I thank the Secretary of State for his statement and for answering the questions. And we now come to the 10-minute rule motion. Rob Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I beg to move that leave be given to bring in a bill to exempt NHS clinical staff from the requirement to pay fees under Section 68 of the Immigration Act 2014 and for connected purposes. I declare a partial interest for the avoidance of doubt, Madam Deputy Speaker, as my fiancé is a healthcare professional from overseas, however already has his British citizenship, so will derive no benefit from this bill whatsoever. Madam Deputy Speaker, the NHS is a fundamental part of British life and has been for decades. It's been under a particular spotlight for the past couple of years as we've battled with the most significant public health crisis in our lifetimes. And honourable and right honourable members on all sides of this House have spoken at length about the debt we owe to the NHS clinicians who put themselves in harm's way in order to make sure they could provide healthcare to the rest of us who rely on them so profoundly. I've spoken on this topic several times in the past, both here and in Westminster Hall, and last year I tabled an amendment to the Nationality and Borders Bill to exempt NHS clinical workers from paying the fees associated with applying for indefinite leave to remain. I discussed the amendment with the Minister at the time, the Honourable Member for Corby, as well as his honourable friend, the Member for Torbay, who had responsibilities in this area, and I was told that this amendment, which was unusual in this House as having signatures and support from members from 6 different parties, wasn't acceptable to the government because we couldn't make special cases out of certain groups of people. Shortly afterwards, as the bill was making its way through the House of Lords, the government announced that armed forces veterans were exempted from paying fees for ILR applications, which I thought was interesting given that NHS workers weren't worthy of a special classification just a couple of months before. The Home Secretary at the time, the Right Honourable Member for Witham, said that waiving the visa fee for those Commonwealth veterans and Gurkhas with 6 years' service who want to settle here is a suitable way of acknowledging their personal contribution and service to our nation. Madam Deputy Speaker, taking nothing away from the veterans who put their lives on the line in service of the country and the Commonwealth, I think you'd be hard-pressed to find many members of the public who wouldn't believe that our NHS clinical staff should be worthy of that same consideration. Whilst the entire NHS played a vital role, our thanks and gratitude in particular should go to NHS workers who've come from other countries. These are individuals who've travelled huge distances to be here, often separated from their families, putting their own lives at risk to help and save our lives. Citizens from a different country to their own. Regardless of their or our citizenship, the duty and responsibility to care and contribute to the well-being of others always comes first with them. It's amazing, and it should be highly commended. I welcome the many steps the government has already taken for foreign NHS workers, including the health and care worker visa and exemption from the immigration health surcharge. But we do need to go further. These people want to make the UK their homes. They put down roots, and we have a duty to put in place a framework that allows them to do just that without thousands of pounds worth of costs, just to stay in a country to which they have already contributed so much. With fees for indefinite leave to remain at over £2,400, and citizenship applications another 1,800 or so, plus another few hundred for biometrics, English language tests and all of the supplementary things that need to be done. The total cost of the naturalisation process is more like £5,000 and is one of the highest fees in the world. The process of becoming a citizen for our NHS workers is a costly and challenging one, which includes the ridiculous Life in the UK test, which asks such useful questions about the Great Exhibition of 1851 and which British actors have won Oscars recently. Quite how anyone could be expected to integrate into British society without this pivotal knowledge remains a mystery. Doctors, nurses, physiotherapists, occupational therapists, psychiatrists, all manner of clinicians come to our shores to work in the NHS. They pay their taxes every month. They work in the ICU, in high dependency units, in paediatric cancer centres, in everything from obstetrics and neonatal units to geriatric and palliative care. They spend their working life in this country saving lives, especially during the pandemic. They have to take out loans to be able to pay for their residency applications, As I've said a number of times before, we shouldn't be driving them into debt, we should be in their debt. It's our duty to create a new route for citizenship for NHS clinicians, one that won't leave workers in debt, poverty or in constant worry about funding their next application, by abolishing the costs associated with applying for indefinite leave to remain and citizenship for NHS clinical workers. There'd have to be some caveats, obviously, in that they would need to have worked in the NHS for at least 3 years, and also would need to commit to remaining within the NHS for at least a further 3 years. Otherwise, the fees that would have been paid would become due. This is necessary just to stop people gaining the benefit that I hope would benefit clinicians in our NHS, and then deciding that after they have their right to reside that they'll go into the private sector immediately. That would be counterproductive to what I'm trying to achieve. Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm proud that our NHS attracts such global talent and recruits from around the world, and quite frankly, we wouldn't be able to run it without them. In 2021, over 160,000 NHS staff stated that they were a non-British nationality from over 200 different countries, accounting for nearly 15% of all staff for whom a nationality is known. Yet current fees and process is a huge barrier to both future NHS workers who are put off coming to the UK to fill our many vacancies, and for current NHS workers who are unable to afford the final step and have that permanent residency they have earned through their service to our country. Residency and citizenship shouldn't be about cost and whether you can afford it. It should be about contribution and inclusion in our communities. And NHS workers have perhaps given the biggest contribution of all, saving our lives and keeping us safe. Despite being such valued members of the communities in which they live and work, without being citizens, they struggle to be fully part of those communities. Without ILR, individuals face barriers to home ownership, as it's almost impossible to get a mortgage, barriers in higher education, and in so many other aspects of life. Scrapping the fees would therefore not only make residency and citizenship more affordable and a viable option for foreign workers in our NHS, but would also create a more diverse and, crucially, a more integrated society. People from other countries that have worked in our NHS during this pandemic and throughout their lives deserve to be able to call the UK their home and actually feel as though it is. The pandemic had one benefit. It highlighted what many of us already knew, that our NHS workers, whether British or not, are the backbone of our health service and our country. That those who have come here to provide such incredible care should not be penalised for it. And currently, the high application fees do just that. In conclusion, Madam Deputy Speaker, it's time to abolish the fees for indefinite leave to remain and citizenship for those clinical staff that work in our NHS, so that those who spend time helping and treating us can finally feel like they belong and are welcomed in our country with open arms.
The question is that the honourable member have leave to bring in the bill. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Who will prepare and bring in the bill?
Sarah Atherton, Mark Fletcher, Henry Smith, Dr Philippa Whitford, Martin Day, Claudia Webb, Margaret Ferrier, Ben Lake, Jim Shannon and myself.
Rob Roberts.
Immigration and nationality fees exemption for NHS clinical staff.
Second reading what day?
Friday, 24th of March.
Friday, 24th of March. Thank you.